Well, hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. What's in a name? Well, you've heard that old Shakespeare quote about a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, or something like that. We're going to talk with Mike Sharman. He's the legal counsel for Share Healthcare. That's an interesting name, Share Healthcare. Of course, it's a Christian ministry, and we're talking to Christians mostly, so this is something that might interest you as a Christian. A lot of churches aren't growing. Some churches are shrinking, but some churches are growing fast. And somebody did a study of churches and their names, and they came up with this list of the most common words in fast-growing church names. And here are some of them. At the top of the list is the word community, which is a great word. A second is Christian. That seems obvious. Baptist is third. That's obvious. But then you come down to some other words where you're like, is that, that's interesting. The word life. Many fast-growing churches have the word life in their name or their new name. Grace, fellowship, hope, city, valley, rock, and journey. Those are just some of the top. Those are common words in fast-growing church names. Now, if you say, what's in a name? You might have been part of a church where you changed the name of the church to try to be more open to the community, probably. So we're going to talk about this a little bit with Mike Sharman and also about the name Share Healthcare. But Mike, we've got this quote from Romeo and Juliet, written by Shakespeare. What's in a name? What is in a name?
Well, Doug, I think it's very important. Confession is good for the soul. So I think it's good for us to confess to the listeners. You and I both had to look up. We knew the quote. We didn't know where it came from or really if it was the exact quote, what our recollection was. So, the real quote helps so much with this understanding of what's in a church name or what's in a ministry name, because it's Juliet speaking, and Juliet is talking to Romeo. And remember, their families were the older version of the Hatfields and McCoys. Mm-hmm. Their families were in a serious war, and so she's in love with Romeo, this guy who's on the other side of this clan warfare. And she tells Romeo, after she's fallen in love with him, she tells him, well, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, so Romeo would, were he not Romeo called. And so she's saying the essence of who you are is still the same. Doesn't matter what your name is. So when you're talking about church names, the essence of who they are, the bride of Christ, the place where we bring ourselves, the temple, because we are now the temple, but we bring ourselves, bringing the temples that is within our heart, bring them collectively so that we can be acting out all those one another verses and all those love your neighbor verses that we're told. So what's in a name? That which we call a church by any other name would smell as sweet. So I thought it was pretty interesting in looking at this list of fast-growing church names. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like about 20 of them. And the only denominational name is Baptist. Mm-hmm. No Presbyterian, no Methodist, no Catholic, nothing. Only Baptist, and that's number 3, which is, I thought, pretty surprising to me because I know a lot of Baptist churches retain their membership in their Baptist organization, but they change the name on that individual church. Mm-hmm. But here we see that, the third fastest growing group of church names is Baptist, and then community, which is great. Koinonia, that fellowship community name in Scripture is one of the main essences, and of course Christian is it. But looking at those words, they embody what the church ought to be. After those basics, community, Christian, Baptist, the next highest word is life. Mm. We know it is the new life. We know it's what gives us life. We know that we are dead before Christ, and we come to life only in Him. And then the word right after that lets us know why. Grace is that fifth word, fastest growing church name word, grace. Well, we don't really get life until we have the grace, until we've received it and accepted it. Christ has been offering it the entire time. But it's not until we accept that grace, recognize that the sins are already on us, and the only way we're going to get rid of them is by Christ, by being a Christian, by being in community with Him, being baptized, doing that outward manifestation of the inward change. It's only by grace that occurs, and then we have fellowship, we have hope, all those other words that then descend from there in the fastest growing church names. Pretty surprising of the power of a name.
Yeah, I know a few churches around where I am in Tallahassee that have all those various names come into play. So, what's in a name? One of the guy who wrote the article, he shared this little anecdote from being in the St. Louis area and driving past. He saw a billboard and it just had one word on it, ascend. And he thought, well, he and his wife were thinking, well, is that like one of these trendy new church names? Because I'm pretty sure I've heard of either a church or at least a youth group called Ascend. But in the St. Louis area, apparently on the billboard that he saw, it was a new legalized marijuana dispensary.
Meaning get high.
Yes. Ascend. So, what's in a name? Everybody wants to try to have a name that sounds pleasing and acceptable. I know around here, when somebody talks about changing their church name, I'm not against changing a church name. If that's what, your group wants to do, then go for it. But I have said this before, here in Tallahassee, we have the Florida State Seminoles. I say, you notice what we do. We don't change the name when they're not playing well. We might fire the coach. But we don't change the name because, as Shakespeare said, a name by any other name will smell as sweet. A rose would smell as sweet. Of course, garbage would smell as bad by any other name.
Yeah, I have my brother-in-law, my sister and brother-in-law live down in Tallahassee, and his name's Lonnie Mann. And he's retired now, but he works in archaeology quite a bit, and primarily in the Indian history there in the Tallahassee region. But also, he's just been asked to do a number of times help in researching the Black history around there. And there was a church there that was one of the oldest ones called New Hope, and he was asking me, well, why would they be called New Hope? And what was fun researching that with him and finding out how many others, because he was saying, well, what church, what denomination is New Hope? And I said, well, I'm looking around at how many other churches are called New Hope all around, and at what era this church was founded. And the church that he was talking about was a post-Civil War church. And I said, just think about it now. Here you are, you've been a body of Christians, because a whole lot of the slaves, when they were brought over from Africa, were already Christians. They just didn't acquire Christianity when they were here. And so they were in slavery here, but now they're freed, and they have new hope.
Yeah.
And their children who were never slaves have new hope. We who are the larger, white population around, we were slaves to our sin. And when we get freed from that by the grace of Christ, we have new hope. And you notice in that the list of big names or common words for fast-growing churches, hope is just right there below grace and fellowship. It's like you had started off with the initial explanation or reason for this, our topic for today. What's in a name matters.
Yeah, so we're talking with you as your part in Share Healthcare. And I think about big insurance companies. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the big insurance companies, and they all have interesting names, like United or Allied or whatever. I don't know all the names, but those were chosen very particularly, I'm sure. Well,
until the latter part of the last century, insurance companies had to be local. They could not go really beyond their state area. There might be some national headquarters, but it would still be a local one. So you have things like Hartford. Hartford Insurance began in Hartford. Farmers Insurance began as a specific one for farmers. State Farm wanted to let you know that it's a statewide one for the farmers. So their name wanted to tell you something about them. And with Share Healthcare, we're not insurance. And so that's why that first word is so important, share. And what is Share Healthcare? It's a 501c3 nonprofit ministry. So, we've gone through all the process of becoming a nonprofit organization. Even before we filed under the current name Share Healthcare, it had been a nonprofit that was church-based going back into the 1990s. And so Share Healthcare, 501c3 nonprofit ministry, what's a specific ministry? Is sharing the medically necessary medical expenses of our members. Who are our members? Our members are Christians of any denomination, whether their church name has community in it or Bible in it, or Presbyterian or Methodist or Baptist or Catholic. If they're Christian, they would qualify, so to speak, to be one of our members. In fact, we're exempt from the Affordable Care Act. Healthcare sharing ministries and members of them are exempt from the Affordable Care Act, and then the different states that have just adopted the Affordable Care Act as their state law and have an individual mandate, because some states do, our members are exempt from those things too, based on the definition of what is a healthcare sharing ministry. One element of that definition is the people have to be members of a faith. So ours are members of Christian faith, Christianity, and they have to share in accordance with that faith. So we share one another's medically necessary medical expenses. And in that sharing, and because we are members of a single faith and the one true faith, Christ is the way, the truth, the life. It's kind of surprising. I'm looking at this list. Truth is not on there, but life is. So we're Christians. We share in accordance with our faith. And because of that, we're incredibly affordable. I say incredibly because compared to anything else, any of the healthcare exchanges, the state exchanges, the healthcare.gov exchange, insurance, we're $149 per month for a single, $249 per month for a couple, $349 per month for a family of four. Well, that's because we share our health care expenses. If you read the articles on why insurance and all the subsidized healthcare exchanges, why are they getting expensive, you'll see two explanations. One is the general rising cost of healthcare, and then two, each one of the articles will say because of the weight loss drugs such as Olympic or Ozempic, I think it is. Well, that's not healthcare. That isn't healthcare. That's I want to have this be simpler care. And I don't want to minimize the concern for some people with obesity. If they have an organic problem, they need to have an organic solution to it. I mean, if there's something problematic in their body, then they need to have their doctor let them know what that is, whether it's diet or exercise or just one of the dials in our body's mechanism needs to be adjusted. But a mere weight loss drug is not going to do that. It's going to only deal with the symptom while the disease or problem rages on, creating more problems. One of those problems is it causes everybody's health insurance and subsidized health care to increase. Well, it doesn't cause any sort of increase for Share Healthcare. Why? Because we share one another's medically necessary health care expenses.
And I guess maybe we should ask the question, what is medically necessary?
It's just one of those self-defining terms. It's cosmetic surgery is not medically necessary unless you had an accident or disease which causes you to need cosmetic surgery. If you had some sort of accident that caused a lot of problems to your face or a burn that just needs cosmetic surgery, well, then that's medically necessary. If you've had cancer and you need a breast reconstruction, well, that's medically necessary. But a person who just wants a breast enhancement, that's not. A person who wants a tattoo removal, that's not. those type of distinctions. So just saying cosmetic surgery is not part of our medically necessary is not accurate. If it's medically necessary cosmetic surgery, well, it is. And it just sort of follows that idea follows from there too. Now, it also ties in with biblical concepts. We're supposed to be sharing in accordance with our faith. That means we can't share in anything, either legally or morally. We can't share in anything that would offend God. We can't share in abortions. That's offensive to God, who is the creator of all life and knits us together in our mother's womb. We can't share in abortifacients because God is the one who decides who becomes pregnant or who does not. And when we get in there and interfere with that, that's a pretty major problem biblically, and then legally and morally for us and our definition as a healthcare sharing ministry, which can only share with members of its faith in accordance with the faith. We can't share, and we don't share, with the transgender destruction concepts that are, hopefully that fad is beginning to fade out as a fad, but it's out there. And insurance companies are paying for that. Some states mandate it, but since we're not insurance and we're outside the Affordable Care Act, we're outside the regulation of insurance, then we don't share, and we wouldn't share in any of those transgender destruction type of expenses. And those give people a concept of what we mean by medically necessary. If your doctor has said, this is necessary for your health, then we share in that. Now, let me back up onto dollars and cents for that. We also try to design share healthcare to fit with the biblical concept of loads and burdens. We're supposed to individually and as a family, or sometimes even as a church family, we're supposed to carry what load we can carry. And then the burden that is beyond our ability to carry, the body of Christ is supposed to share in. So for us right now, it is $2,000 is the per event personal expense. And then above that, everything is shareable. So what do we mean by event? Well, it's kind of an imprecise term because probably a better one would be saying diagnostic, a scope of diagnostic treatment or course of treatment. So let's say a person has a very difficult diagnosis. Well, really with the cost of healthcare now, it doesn't have to be that terrible. But let's use a pretty aggressive cancer. Well, of course, that's going to get up to $2,000 after you've just finished a couple of tests. But then we have no lifetime limit. We have no annual limit. We have no per event limit. Everything above $2,000 for that course of treatment is shareable. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. $149 for a single, $249 for a couple, $349 for a family of four.
Well, the price says a lot for sure, and I know that's going to be appealing to a lot of people. So if they're thinking, hey, I'm sure there's a lot more to this than you're talking about, where would they need to go to find more of the nitty-gritty details?
Well, first go to our website, and that's sharehealthcare.com. sharehealthcare.com. Remember, we were talking about what's in the name. Well, you want to be looking up what are we talking about with Share Healthcare, so you look at sharehealthcare.com. And after you've looked at the website, written down your questions, then you can call 1-844-SHARE-HC. 1-844-SHARE-HC. Talk to a real-life human during working hours, because our real-life humans that work for us, they go home to their families, and they should be able to answer any question you might have.
All right. Well, sharehealthcare.com is the website, and the phone number again, 1-844-SHARE-HC. That's Mike Sharman, and for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.